You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. Together, we will discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient Conversations. My name is Sebastian Calmes. I'm a wellness specialist with UKHR Health and Wellness. Today on the show, I have with me Karen McNees. Karen, thanks for being here with me.
Thank you for inviting me, Sebastian. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Karen and I are coworkers on the UKHR Health and Wellness team. Karen, tell me about yourself, your role, and how you landed at UK.
I've been at UK in this role as a full-time dietitian for about 20 years. I provide one-on-one nutrition counseling. I coordinate the weekly Eat Well member meetings that we provide to our eligible folks, as well as various presentations and doing fun things like this, like your podcast. I am originally from upstate New York. I got my undergraduate degree at Syracuse University in dietetics. Thought I wanted to work in higher education for some reason. Realized that just felt like not the right fit for me. Went back to school. I got my doctorate in health promotion here at the University of Kentucky, and I have been here ever since. And it's been a great opportunity to merge nutrition with health and wellness.
Karen, one of your bread and butter nutrition offerings is consults. Could you tell us about that and who is eligible?
UK employees, spouses, UK retirees, and their spouses are eligible to participate. I offer one-on-one nutrition consults in person, by Zoom, phone, or email. And I can tackle most nutrition issues. One thing I don't work with is eating disorders. That's a whole specialty that I'm not qualified in, but certainly we can help find resources for that if it's of interest. But we run the gamut. People want to lose weight, manage their cholesterol, manage their diabetes, deal with a food sensitivity, deal with a picky toddler at home. Yeah, bring it on and please come meet with me. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Excellent. Well, March being National Nutrition Month, we're going to take a closer look at nutrition and our relationship with food in this episode. Also looking at intuitive eating and mindful eating. It may be an obvious first question, but how does what we eat affect our daily lives? How much impact does food actually have on us?
I will answer that question with a personal story. The reason I got interested in nutrition, and I remember this as a high school student, my dad decided he wanted to be healthier. He had two fairly young kids and had seen his father die very early of heart disease. He just realized at that point in his life that if I continue on this trajectory, I may end up in the same boat and not see all the things I want to see as my kids grow up. So he did a radical lifestyle change. I was old enough in high school to see it and appreciate it and noticed he was cooking different things, eating differently, moving more. He significantly lowered all of his biometric numbers in terms of cholesterol, blood sugar, and all of those things that put him at higher risk. And he did lose some weight, which he needed to lose. I just saw him become a more vibrant, happier person. I saw that transformation over a couple of years. That's what sparked my interest in nutrition. I still believe to this day that is why we should care about nutrition and what we put in our bodies. It should be for energy, vitality, living a long life, quality of life, not just a long life, but having those years be quality. We can do the things we want to do and participate in everything that life has to offer us. I think that is the essence of what this is about. What I found interesting was he never preached it to us, meaning me or my sister. It was a lead by example situation.
It sounds like it was effective.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was on purpose, but I do feel like that was helpful in hindsight. People now with their nutrition feel like, I don't know, somebody's wagging a finger at them all the time. A doctor might be wagging a finger saying, you should do this, you need to do that. Maybe somebody in your family is nagging at you. Of course, it's coming from a good place with your best interests at heart, but it can feel like a lot of wagging fingers. I have always felt that leading by example in the situation with my dad was really effective. I try to do that now in my own home with my kids. It's worked. It's amazing what people pick up just through osmosis, observing you routinely. So I think that's powerful.
The nutrition industry is a place where that finger wagging mentality has infiltrated. Do you feel like that turns off or confuses a lot of people about what to do?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very large soapbox we could have a whole nother podcast on. And from my perspective, I like to tell people I am a dietitian who enjoys chocolate, butter, wine, and good bread, all in moderation. Any food people enjoy should be savored and made a part of your life. I think the way the nutrition industry is structured right now, there is a lot of dichotomy, for lack of a better word, a lot of black and white talk about what to do or not to do. With social media, I get on there and look at what's going on in the nutrition world, and I'll see an article or a blog that says, eat these 10 things to live a long life or have healthy aging, or never eat these 10 things if you don't want to get diabetes. It just sounds all very scary to people. I think it's a lot of scaremongering. It sounds more final in terms of what we know about any of those things than it actually is. Can the research back all those claims up? I guarantee you it can't. But it sounds good. There's a kernel of truth that all of this is based on. It's not a complete lie a lot of the times, but it gets exaggerated. Of course, it's meant to get clicks on the internet or to get you to buy a book or a magazine. It's all about that.
You said you're a registered dietitian, yet you enjoy bread, wine, chocolate. What is this philosophy you are eating by?
A lot of it is intuitive eating, and I am a certified intuitive eating coach. That is something we do offer through our programming periodically throughout the year. I suggest people keep an eye out for that if what I'm about to say interests them. Intuitive eating, I would describe as a holistic self-care approach. It's thinking about how you can honor your body's natural wisdom, which we all have. Babies know when they're hungry and full. You can't stop a baby from eating if it wants to eat, and you can't make it eat more if it doesn't want to eat more. It honors those things. We all have those signals. We also have individual preferences in terms of tastes and the types of foods that we want to eat, what works best for us in terms of timing of eating. So it's honoring those different variables, how they work best for us, and how we're paying attention to those signals. But a lot of people lose touch with those signals because of nutrition and diet culture. Maybe they've heard so many things about intermittent fasting, or maybe they've heard so many things about never eating this food, even though that's a food they love and they would be sad if they never ate it again. So they're trying to follow all of these rules that make no sense and are not evidence-based, and then they're losing touch with natural wisdom that could guide them. And not just when to eat or how much to eat, but also what to eat, what makes your body feel good, what makes it not feel good. Like, you might love eating some fast food once in a while and you might not feel good afterwards, but that's a choice you have to make. Yeah. Is it worth it to me? Everybody's going to answer those types of questions differently. So it's learning about how to honor that. That's what I try to do. I try to find for myself the sweet spot between what's going to best serve my health and energy and quality of life needs, and merge that as best I can with also the natural cravings for different foods I have, and trying to stay flexible.
I love that philosophy of eating. What strikes me is its simplicity. We're born with natural intuitions or body wisdom, for example. Like you said, a baby knows when it's hungry and it knows when it's done eating. That full feeling, would you say that's past what was necessary to eat?
For a lot of people, once they start exploring, they realize what they thought was comfortable fullness was probably too full.
I've experienced that firsthand. I eat and I'm like, okay, I'm good, but I don't feel full. So then I have this thing, but I should feel full. I feel like we program ourselves with these extra things, which wasn't intuitive at first. Our intuitive eating philosophy is about pulling away those things we've programmed. And then back to basics, what is intuitive for my body?
That's a good way to put it. The concept is simple. Simple does not mean easy. Grasping the concept is simple, but doing it is not necessarily easy. That's a journey that people definitely take to try to become more intuitive eaters if they have lost those signals or now have a poor relationship with food in their body. That's a journey that takes time and effort and experimentation. I want to acknowledge it's not easy, but yes, the concept's simple and it's almost radical in its simplicity. We have a lot of people who go through our intuitive eating 7-week program, and they're like, this is a crazy way to look at food. It's so new and different and against everything I feel like I'm hearing all the time. But I think the simplicity is part of why it feels so radical to people.
What are the main tenets of intuitive eating?
Pivoting away from diet culture. That's related to some of the things we already talked about, with the scary headlines, making everything sound black and white, getting away from labeling foods as good or bad.
You mentioned moderation earlier.
Giving yourself that permission to eat those foods when they make sense for you. I love Cheetos, for example. So I got to be real careful. Okay, I know I'm not going to feel so good after, but man, I got that craving and I want to satisfy it. Sometimes I do. It's not always about not eating the food. It's not even always about only eating to the point of comfortable fullness. Sometimes I'll make a meal at home and be like, this is good. I don't think it's going to be quite as good left over. I'm just going to eat a little bit more now because it does taste so good, even though I know I've had enough to probably feel comfortably full. We're not saying those things aren't allowed either, but you have to make these choices on a situation basis, I think, based on your, again, merging of your wants and needs and honoring both those things. I think part of the problem for a lot of people is part of this, again, kind of food culture we have is about feeling like we have to sacrifice one for the other. We either enjoy food and we're eating not healthy, or we're eating not healthy and we're not enjoying foods. Right?
It's teaching ourselves how to make our own food decisions day to day, whereas a strict diet is more black and white. Yes, no, never, that kind of thing. To where, okay, maybe cheeseburger and fries today because I haven't had it in 2 weeks.
That's a great example, but I also think that is the appeal of, I guess, diet culture and kind of our food culture. I have a lot of people come to me, just tell me what to eat, because that feels easy. I'm like, I can't do that. I can't even tell you what I'm going to eat tomorrow. Right. I'm not sure. It depends on what's going on with me.
Is your next question usually, well, what do you like?
Yeah, that's true. A lot of times it is. Well, what do you eat? I get the wanting to just be told, but again, it just doesn't work that way. And it does take work and some effort to figure it out for yourself and build sustainable eating habits.
And that makes so much sense. I used to be a personal trainer at the YMCA. The first thing I would tell a client was, after 10 sessions, you shouldn't need me anymore. If you still need me, then I didn't do my job. And I think that's the same way, because I don't want that person to have to need something to tell me, what exercises do I do today? I want that person to know, oh, my chest is feeling sore from chest day yesterday. That means I'm going to do legs today.
Yeah.
But they know that because they feel that. So I feel like intuitive eating is similar.
That is such a great parallel, and I would want you as my personal trainer if I ever had a personal trainer. That's a very honest approach to it, and that is how I view food too. I do follow-ups for people for sure, where we can monitor you for a while once we set up some goals and all of that. I don't want to continue for a year or two working on the same thing. Yeah, the goal is to have maybe some training wheels, someone like a personal trainer or a dietitian, to get you going, and then be able to take those training wheels off and you can go on your own for a while.
Absolutely. Would you say that's the core philosophy behind the Eat Well offerings?
Yes, I'd say so. I'd say even more so over time. I'm expressing frustration with current trends in our food culture and in diet culture. I think there are some positive shifts happening, and I think there are shifts happening in the direction of intuitive eating, and I'm happy to see that. I think our programming has evolved quite a bit over the past 20 years where I've been here to participate in it. I'm proud of that. I think we have, even for ourselves here at Eat Well, have gotten away from more of the kind of diet, very specific kind of weight management, weight loss goals, and moved to a little bit more of a holistic, full person approach to eating, which also incorporates the intuitive eating. One thing I do want to say about intuitive eating, people often ask me, is that a good way to lose weight? Because I understand that's a goal for a lot of people, to want to lose weight for various reasons. They ask me, is intuitive eating a good way to do that? Intuitive eating is a good way to set you up to do that later. I would not recommend that somebody tries to become an intuitive eater and actively be trying to lose weight at the same time. Those things are not compatible, and I would not recommend that. What I would recommend is if you feel like you struggle with some of these elements of intuitive eating we've talked about, focus on becoming an intuitive eater first. That sets the foundation. And then once you feel confident in that, you can pivot to your weight loss goals and you'll be able to come at it from a place where you have that healthy relationship with food and your body.
That makes sense, yeah. That's a good distinction of what intuitive eating is and what it isn't.
Yes, intuitive eating is very weight neutral. It just wants nothing to do with weight, to be quite honest.
Another popular eating philosophy is mindful eating. What are key differences between mindful eating and intuitive eating, if any?
That's a great question. Intuitive eating is much more all-encompassing in terms of the things we talked about. Mindful eating is more about the eating experience itself. In those moments of deciding what am I going to eat and the actual eating, that's where I think mindful eating is a little different. That's what its primary focus is. With mindful eating, you would be focusing on, before you even eat, what foods sound good to me? Not unlike intuitive eating in some ways, honoring your wants and needs. What am I feeling? What do I need? Am I physically hungry? Am I have a craving? Am I in the mood for something hot, cold, or crunchy, or soft, or creamy, salty, or sweet? Going through all those things, trying to make that decision about what to eat. And then when you're eating, it's about focusing on that, trying to eat without distraction, which can be hard for a lot of people. And we can come back to that, but trying to eat without distraction, trying to eat as slowly as possible. Part of that is about the enjoyment. The slower you're eating, the more you can savor the taste and the smell and the textures of the foods. But part of that is also about making sure you'll be able to stop eating when you're comfortably full. A lot of the listeners may have heard this before, but it takes about 20 minutes for your brain and your stomach to communicate to each other, that you are full, okay? So once food starts hitting your stomach, there's little receptors in there, sends nerve signals up to your brain, and it's a little bit of a feedback loop that's happening for 20 minutes until your brain can register how full you truly are. If you're a fast eater,
you could have overeaten and not even known it yet.
Yes. And that is why I encourage people to not initiate eating when they're overly hungry. If you start eating when you're too hungry, you are very likely to end up eating past the point of comfortable fullness. You probably are overeating because you're starting eating when you're too hungry. And it's hard to get a balance there, partly because of the timing. You're going to eat so quickly and urgently, and you're not going to feel satisfied. You're going to go back for more and blow past that point of comfortable fullness before the 20 minutes is up. To honor the 20 minutes, I tell people, feed yourself what you think is probably reasonable based on your experience. Wait the 20 minutes and then see if you want to go back for more. You certainly have permission to do that, but at least wait 20 minutes if overeating is a problem you struggle with. The mindful eating, too, is also paying attention as you're eating to think, is this food what I wanted it to be? Is what I expected it to be? Is it as good as I thought it would be? Is it something that's worth continuing eating? And paying attention to that. Am I even enjoying it? A lot of times we're just eating things, not even tasting them, not even enjoying them. That can lead to overeating later. If you're not feeling psychologically fulfilled by a food or a meal.
It's because you didn't even pay attention to eating it. I've definitely done that.
And I think maybe that's what you were describing before. Like you can know I ate enough to feel full, but still feel you want to keep eating. A lot of times it's because of that, because people just weren't paying attention to the enjoyment. Maybe they were forcing themselves to eat foods they don't like. I see a lot of people do that because of diet culture, making themselves choke down all these foods they think they need to eat to be healthy that they don't enjoy. Well, of course you're going to crave some Cheetos and M&Ms later because you didn't get any satisfaction from the food you ate earlier.
I had some experiences in my family where it was like, oh, finish your plate. It's like this moral imperative, which to an extent, I agree. I don't want to waste food, but at the same time, I don't want to suffer because I'm trying not to waste food.
Who does that help in the end, right? Yeah, like, and the clean plate thing, that's a big struggle point for a lot of people. Well into adulthood, I'm not sure people ever fully cleanse that from their psyche. My husband grew up in the Clean Plate Club. Luckily, I did not, but I've seen it firsthand. He's well into adulthood and still it's a struggle. He tries to wait the 20 minutes to decide to go back for more and serve himself a little less than he thinks he's hungry for, those kind of things. But yeah, that is a real struggle for a lot of people. We all want to be respectful of the value of food, of course, just in terms of what food represents and the nourishment and the economics of it. But at the end of the day, you have to hopefully prioritize your self-care and figure out if that's worth it.
Absolutely. Long-term joyful relationship with food.
Yes.
It sounds like these two approaches, intuitive eating and mindful eating, could complement each other, where intuitive eating is more broad or the overarching philosophy, whereas mindful eating is the eating experience itself.
That's the distinction I would make, yes. Okay. I would say mindful eating is appropriate and to be encouraged for anybody. Intuitive eating to some extent as well. Mindful eating, I think, might be more accessible to people in terms of just being a little bit more concrete and something they feel maybe they could start with.
Yeah. TV is a big one too, watching TV and eating.
I'm glad you brought that up because that distraction piece I did want to go back to. And I know a lot of people are just, that's what we do or that's what I do. If you have to have something going while you're eating, maybe listening to something instead of watching something. I don't have anything to base this on. This is just based on my own experience. But I think it takes a lot more mental energy and it's a lot more stimulating to be viewing something than to listen to something. I encourage people, if you find it awkward to not have the TV on, maybe transition to listening to it. Maybe you don't face the TV and we just listen to it if it's something you can listen to. Maybe listen to a podcast or put some music on or something like that. Because I do feel like the sensory overload from the visuals is maybe the biggest distractor is when you're eating.
Let's shift into some specific questions about protein and sugar. Lately, protein is being lauded as one of, if not the most important aspects of our diets. Does protein deserve this status?
The short answer is no. Foods go through crazes, just like fashion or anything else. We had in the 90s the low-fat craze, and then following that was the low-carb craze. Then we had a fiber craze for a while. If anyone remembers that, we were putting fiber in everything, even like yogurt where it doesn't belong. Now here we are at the protein craze, okay? So this is how it goes. It's a lot of marketing behind this. I don't fully understand how these crazes get started, but as soon as there is one, there is certainly an impetus for everyone to hop on the bandwagon and try to make some money off of it if this is what people are paying attention to at the moment. I think we need to remember that. I do think the protein craze is a natural result of some other things that have been happening. You've been hearing a lot more about reducing carbohydrate intake, especially with more prevalence of diabetes or people concerned about their blood glucose levels. Also reducing carbohydrates as a way to lose and manage weight. If you're talking about reducing carbohydrates, well, what else are you going to eat? Okay, now we're left with protein and fat. Fat is very calorie dense. For a lot of people, from a calorie perspective, that's not going to make sense to add a whole lot of fat to their diet either. So then you're left with protein. I feel like it's a natural evolution of everything else that's been going on. I understand it, but the reality is protein deficiency in this country or any other modernized Western country is not a thing.
Just so I understand, up to this point, there's 3 nutrition groups. What are those 3?
Yes, that's a good clarification. Okay. We call them macronutrient groups. When people see things like count your macros and all of that, this is what that means. Macronutrients. They are carbohydrates, protein, and fats. We're not protein deficient as a country. There are exceptions, certainly, if somebody has a real severe chronic illness or they're going through chemotherapy or they're having some very severe GI issues, but it's very rare, exceedingly rare, okay? First of all, I don't want people running around feeling like they're at risk of being protein deficient. That is what this craze has done. I can't tell you how many clients I've had in the last few months just worried they're not eating enough protein. So first of all, that's not going to be the case for vast majority of people. If people want specific recommendations, which I do like to put out there just because people are so focused on this right now, just for an example, the recommended daily amount of protein for an average, normal, healthy person is 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight. To put that in perspective, for a 150-pound person, that would be 54 grams of protein.
You just take your weight and multiply it by 0.36?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. For a 150-pound person, that is 54 grams of protein. That is not a lot. I almost guarantee you, but you're probably getting that. If you have goals, though, to maintain muscle mass, maybe as you're aging, that is a concern, sure. Or if you have a specific fitness plan where you're trying to actually increase your muscle mass, then you might want to bump it up a little. At that point, you could go to 0.5 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Now for that 150-pound person, that brings us to 75 to 120 grams of protein per day. Still doable and within reason for most people. If your goal is to build or maintain muscle mass, your body can only use about 40 grams of protein at a time to do that.
What's a time? Like a meal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably within a 3 or 4 hour window. There's a lot of controversy about what that range is. You'll see anywhere from like 25 to 40 grams of protein at a time. If we take the upper range and say 40 is the max, even if you ate 3 meals a day with 40 grams of protein in them,
that's a lot.
You're now at that 120 for that 150-pound person. So you don't need more than that, depending on your weight. Other people that might want to think about increased protein in that 0.5 to 0.8 gram range would be people on GLP-1 medications that are very popular now for both diabetes and weight loss, especially if you're on a dosage that is meant for weight loss. We know that these medications can affect people's muscle mass. That's a concern now as we're seeing people on them for longer periods of time. I would recommend higher levels for those folks as well.
You mentioned people may have a muscle mass goal or maybe maintaining muscle mass goal, which brings me to exercise and food. How does exercise affect what we should and shouldn't eat? I have thought this myself, but sometimes people reason because they're exercising a lot, they can eat whatever they'd like. What's your opinion on this?
Exercise shouldn't change what you're trying to eat in terms of a balance of those macronutrients every day. Some good high fiber, whole grains and healthy carbs, other things like fruits, yogurt, milk, lean proteins and healthy fats. It shouldn't change any of those basics about what you're eating and getting a good distribution of those every day. The problem is how much do we need to eat to compensate for that exercise or to create the balance we want there. It is easy to underestimate how many calories you're consuming through food and easy to overestimate how many calories you're burning through exercise. Not that is everybody's goal when they're exercising to burn calories, which I understand it is not, but that's a big part of it. People would pay attention to, my fitness tracker told me I burned this many calories and okay, I can eat those back now.
My girlfriend tells me I burned 300 active calories during my workout. Oh, what does that mean?
Yeah. That's an excellent follow-on question. Well, that's the thing. It's a data point. But those fitness trackers, and also if you're using an exercise machine, even at the gym, that's telling you burn this many calories from this workout, they are notoriously inaccurate. Again, they give the illusion of being accurate, but they are not. They can be wildly off. And there's plenty of research to back that up. I would tell people not to put too much stock in those numbers, not any. If you have a fitness tracker that is connected to a food tracker, a lot of people have them talking to each other, like they're inputting their food on one, and then the fitness tracker is inputting, this is how many calories you burn through activity and making adjustments based on that. Disconnect them. Do not let your fitness tracker and your food tracking app talk to each other. To me, that is the biggest trap because that is what's going to lead to what I call the eat back trap, where you're going to see, it told you, I burned these many calories. Now I have these to eat. Again, going back to intuitive eating, we should be making these decisions about what and how much to eat based on what our body's telling us.
What we feel.
Yes. In that situation, and I see this all the time, people are making the decision based on, the app told me I can eat more. That is not the reason to decide to eat. The reason to decide to eat is I had a big workout today. That was an intense one. Or I was just more active throughout the day. So yeah, I probably did get a little hungrier because I was more active, and that's okay. I'm just going to eat to fulfill that extra hunger I feel right now because of that. That's how you make the decision, not based on all those numbers the trackers are telling you.
So again, pay attention to what you're feeling, not what these numbers are saying.
And even without the physical activity piece, people just feel differently day to day. I mean, I always joke about hungry days. Like, sometimes it's just a hungry day. And I can't always explain it. A lot of times it's related to sleep deprivation for people. That is a big thing sleep deprivation will increase your hunger hormones, make you feel hungrier. Stress for a lot of people. For some people it depresses appetite, but for a lot of people it increases appetite.
Hence stress eating. Gotcha.
But even while you may feel legitimately more physically hungry day to day, for women it's very hormonal too, based on those fluctuations monthly. Some days it's just a hungry day. You might be like, I know I'm eating a little more than I usually do, but if you're hungry, that is the importance, again, of being able to tell, are you physically hungry or emotionally hungry? Physical hunger, I think most people understand what physical hunger feels like to them. But if you don't, you got to start paying attention. For a lot of people, it feels like some emptiness in your stomach, some grumbling, some growling. Maybe you also start to feel a little low energy or a little shaky, or maybe you get a headache. Maybe it's hard to focus or concentrate.
Or irritable, potentially?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're getting irritable, that means you're probably getting on that hangry.
So that's becoming too hungry.
That probably is starting to be the danger zone.
Gotcha.
Because I'm a hangry person. I will be that way if I don't get food, but I know I've waited too long if I'm that irritable. You might start to get a little edgy if you're just normal hungry, but if you're just like, get out of my way, I need food now, then you've probably waited too long. Those are all the signs of physical hunger. It usually comes on gradually, like you feel it building over time, and it also is leaving you open to different food options. Lots of different foods should sound good when you're physically hungry. Let's contrast that to emotionally driven eating. Eating for any reason that you're not physically hungry. That usually feels very urgent. It comes on suddenly, not gradually, like physical hunger.
I'm craving this all of a sudden.
Yes.
That's an emotional sign.
Yep.
Emotional hunger.
Yes. When it comes on suddenly and it feels very urgent, it's fixated on particular foods. Those are all signs that it's probably something other than physical hunger driving you. Now, it might be mixed up with some physical hunger too. But if you're in that moment thinking, gee, I had dinner not that long ago, I shouldn't feel physically hungry, I'm not sure.
But Chinese sounds really good. Is that a key right there? If you say sounds really good? Okay, gotcha.
That's it. It's very specific because it's a craving. That's probably, again, emotionally driven. We know a lot of emotions drive cravings for certain foods, like high sugar foods, high fat foods, because these are the foods that actually will make us feel better. There is a psychological connection between eating things that are high in sugar or high in fat. They are comforting. They release certain chemicals in our brains that make us temporarily feel better. So we do get some of that out of those types of foods. But that's a big one to look for, that you're fixated on a particular type of food. The other thing to pay attention to is how you feel afterwards. To me, this is maybe one of the best ways to tell. If you feel any kind of guilt or a little shame or something like that after you've eaten, that's probably a sign that there was some emotional element to it. Who feels guilty or shameful after they've eaten because they're hungry? You shouldn't. No, most people don't. I was hungry. I needed to eat. There's no guilt involved in that. You're just you're honoring what your body's telling you to do. Whereas the emotional part, there's often that feeling of guilt afterwards. I'm not saying I think you should feel guilty and beat yourself up if you emotionally eat. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that's the natural reaction for a lot of people to feel that way. So if you have any twinges of that after you eat, that might be a sign that was going on, and you might want to reflect on that.
Bored eating is also an emotional eat. Okay.
Even celebratory eating is emotional eating. I put all of that under one umbrella. I know we often think about it in terms of negative things like stress or frustration or anger or boredom, but it could be, let's go get ice cream because Susie got an A on her report card.
But it sounds like intuitive eating has space for emotional eating. Is that true?
That is a good way to put it. Yes. And that is actually an entire principle in and of itself in intuitive eating. If someone were to take our 7-week series, we'd do a whole week just on emotions and eating. The main point we take away from that lesson is emotional eating is normal. It's okay. It happens. Again, that is where it plays into the intuitive eating of just balancing it with everything else. We're trying to minimize emotional eating for sure. Food has just become such an easy go-to as a way to self-soothe.
Because a lot of foods today are hacked.
That's a really good
They're hacked to hack us. Is that true? Like our better brain chemistry and stuff?
I believe that.
I think one of those culprits is sugar, which, if you would like to, could you tell us what do we need to know about sugar?
Sugar is something that can feel addictive to people. It can look addictive in our brains. Actually, sugar follows a similar reward pathway in our brains, like other drugs do, like hard illegal street drugs.
Yes.
Not as intense, but a similar pathway. So we're getting that reward, absolutely. Fat, to some extent, does the same thing, too. I do think sugar is put in a lot of things because that's just what we crave, what people expect now. I think in a lot of ways, we just think food tastes bland if it's not salty or sugary. That might be unique to this country and a lot of other industrialized Western countries, especially in Europe. Like, they think our food supply is crazy. With the way we have so much sugar and salt added is the way that we flavor food. We're very reliant on that for us to think food tastes good. But manufacturers use this to get us hooked on some of these products. Sugar is eaten for pleasure. Let's put it that way. Going back to emotional eating or a craving, you eat sugar because it's tasty and it makes you feel happy in that moment and you enjoy it, and that's okay. So eating some sugar even every day, like in a good piece of chocolate that you want to enjoy, I have no problem with that. It's just the problem is we have so much sugar hidden in all the other foods that we're eating. So anytime you buy a jar of marinara sauce, or you buy a cereal,
Ketchup.
or yeah, or you buy even bread, perhaps. Yogurt's another great example. There's hidden sugars in lots of the foods we're eating. I think we do want to try to minimize our exposure to added sugars, for sure. We know that sugar is very much linked to inflammation, which I don't think people appreciate and understand. It's actually a big driver of a lot of heart disease, they think, at this point as well. And of course, it's excess calories, too, that don't help us feel full or give us nourishing nutrients. So those are all the reasons to try. There's also naturally occurring sugars, which are in the things I mentioned earlier, like fruit has fructose and milk and yogurt have lactose. Those are naturally occurring types of sugar, but those foods have lots of other nutrient-dense properties.
So it's the added sugar.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So I'm not worried about those. Even in your low-carb yogurt or your no-sugar added yogurt, there's still sugar because it still has lactose. So it's inherent to that product. Just like no sugar added canned fruit, well, it's still going to have sugar in it because fruit has sugar. So I'm not worried about those things. It's when we get it from the processing, when it's added. The more sugar we have, the more we want. Just from a practical perspective, if people are trying to cut back, this is where it will be helpful to read labels to see how much added sugar is in certain products, trying to buy ones that at least have less. You may not ever get to zero with some of these things, but at least less, and just being conscious of that. The other thing I want to mention too is that non-nutritive sweeteners, all these no-calorie sweeteners like stevia, monk fruit, sucralose, aspartame, all those, they still train your taste buds for sweetness, okay? They are not an absolute great fix for that problem in terms of craving sugar. Sure, they're not going to contribute the excess calories, but they are still going to make your taste buds primed for sweetness and to want that sweetness. Sometimes even more so because those types of sweeteners are so intensely sweet compared to regular sugar. So people want to use caution, I think, with all products, whether it has added sugar or the non-nutritive sweeteners too. Going to the food labels, look at the front of the package and ignore everything that's on the front of the package.
Okay.
Notice how hard a food looks like it's trying to sell you. The more you see on the front of a package in terms of claims, probably the harder it's trying to look like it's a healthy food that you should buy. A food shouldn't have to try that hard. If you see a whole bunch of claims, that should be a red flag. But I don't want you to read the claims and think about them because they're all very meaningless. They're half-truths that are just there for a marketing gimmick, honestly. They're maybe based in some truth, but they're just there to get you to pick up the product because they know once you pick the product up off the shelf, you are much more likely to buy it and put it in your cart. There's billions of dollars spent on creating these packages, what they look like, the colors, the type of packaging, the claims that are put on there, billions of dollars put into this to get you to buy stuff. Just notice if there's a lot of stuff there, not a good sign. But generally ignore that. Look at the nutrition facts panel and the ingredient list on the side. I would look at the ingredient list first. If it looks really long, probably not a good sign. If it's also filled with things you can't pronounce, you couldn't even guess what they are, also not a good sign. You should be able to generally understand or recognize what most of those ingredients are, where they might come from, and what their purpose in that food is. If you can't, not a good sign. The nutrition facts panel, added sugar and added sodium would probably be two of my big ones to look for if there's any level of processing to that food, because those are the two things that are always going to sneak in when there's any level of processing.
Nice. Questions from the UK community via our Wellbeing Champions. Is intermittent fasting good for you? Is there a subset of people who shouldn't do intermittent fasting?
Anyone who says they know the answer about intermittent fasting is lying to you. Let's put it this way, okay? Nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody knows. The research is mixed on this. Part of the problem of studying intermittent fasting is there's so many permutations of what intermittent fasting could look like. There's no standardized definition or method for doing it. That in general, too, is just the problem with all nutrition research. It's very hard to prove a lot of things nutritionally with humans. It's very hard to do gold standard, controlled, randomized, prospective studies with humans. It's almost unheard of. That's why there's so many unknowns about nutrition, and it's hard to prove a lot of these things. I put intermittent fasting in that category. I'd say if people are curious, based on what they've learned or read, I wouldn't be opposed to trying it. I would say you want to be sure that you plan your meals carefully, because when you have a limited time in which to eat, then the food you're eating in that window counts even more.
Matters more. Yeah.
I think people underestimate the planning that needs to go into, oh, geez, I'm only eating for 8 hours. I got to make sure I get what I need in those 8 hours. That is important. In terms of length of a fast, I think for a lot of people, again, if they wanted to experiment with it, a 12-hour fasting window would be a good place to start. A lot of people feel like they already do that, even just fairly naturally. So that might be also a sign that it's a reasonable thing for you to experiment with if you think your eating pattern and lifestyle already fit that. But start with a 12-hour window, then you could maybe go to 10, but I would never cut it down to less than 8. A 16-8 breakdown would be the lowest I would go. You don't want to go less than that for sure.
Where 16 hours not eating, 8 hours eating.
Yeah, that would be the most extreme. Some go more extreme than that.
Sure.
Some even go where you're fasting for 2 whole days out of a week. And again, I am not to say that can't work for some people. I would never tell someone something doesn't work for them. You are the expert on you. I would say it's not a good fit for people who maybe have any history of disordered eating, women who are pregnant or breastfeeding. You'd also want to be cautious if you have diabetes or low blood pressure. Intermittent fasting can exacerbate those conditions or cause some unexpected fluctuations in blood pressure or blood sugar. If you're going to do it, I would definitely talk to your healthcare provider and do it under their guidance.
Excellent. Is eating late bad for you or a myth? If it is bad, what time should you stop eating before bed?
So that a little bit goes back to what we were talking about with these rules that we always hear about, or do this and don't do that. I could probably Google right now and find 20 headlines that say, don't ever eat after 8 p.m., telling you that's the worst thing you could do. I generally think it's advisable to try to eat more earlier in the day and try to taper off later in the day if possible. Okay, if possible. But for a lot of people, the way their lifestyles are, that's just not going to make sense. We have families who have lots of after school activities and evening activities with kids and they're running around and, well, we can't eat till 8 o'clock. That's when we get home. So that's fine. You got to be flexible with that. Honor the reality of your situation. I think where the nighttime eating gets a bad rap is how people tend to eat later at night.
Like a huge meal at 8 p.m. or something.
It's not about the fact that you are eating it all after 8 p.m. It's how you're eating. And it's if you're overeating and making poor choices, it probably has something to do with how you were eating throughout the day that day. And so I see a lot of people who are not just skipping breakfast, but maybe also skipping lunch, or maybe not skipping meals, but not having good quality meals and foods throughout the day that actually are satisfying and will help them feel full. Of course, they get to the end of the day and it's now's my chance to eat a good meal or a big meal, or maybe they're overly hungry again at this point and overcompensating for that. You're also just tired and worn out at that point in the day. Your willpower levels are probably struggling more at that point in the evening.
True.
You also have more access to food at home. Maybe you're at work and you're like, oh, I want that, but I don't have it. You're at home, you have access to, I know I have those chips in there or whatever else it is. I think it's the access combined with the emotional state we're in by the end of the day, combined with how else the rest of your day looked like with your eating. Those tend to be what I would pay more attention to. If you do find like my main meal, most of my calories are like late at night and they're not good choices, then yeah, I would work backwards from there and see how you can improve things.
How can I make vegetables that I don't like taste better?
Again, I think we have to work with our natural preferences and understand that maybe you're not going to love every vegetable that exists, and that's okay. But you do have to give vegetables a fair chance and experiment with them. I think for a lot of clients I work with, they grew up eating awfully prepared vegetables that just had maybe no flavor, or they were only boiled, or things like that. Maybe some of your experience growing up and what you've had up to this point has skewed your view on vegetables and what you like or don't like. So you might want to revisit some of those vegetables by preparing them in different ways. Two of my favorite ways to prepare lots of vegetables are either roasting in the oven, where you do it at a high heat and the vegetables caramelize a little and they get a little natural sweetness to them and also have a great texture. My other new favorite method for vegetables is the air fryer. You take a bag of baby carrots or cut up broccoli and put a little tiny bit of oil and salt in there. They're perfect. They're so good. Those are two methods to try with different types of vegetables. You also might try, again, maybe you don't enjoy sitting down and eating a huge salad. Okay, fine. Maybe you can find ways to buy a bag of baby spinach and mix it into things you're already making. Maybe you can chop up the baby spinach and mix it in your marinara sauce you're already going to be eating on your spaghetti, or put it in a soup. Or there's all those shredded vegetables out there like carrots and the cabbage. How can you sneak those in things without maybe you or other picky people in your house noticing or caring about? So it's not like you have to sit down and eat a plate of vegetables. Mixing them in things is a perfectly legitimate way to get your vegetables too. And then finally, I'll say, I think a lot of people, again, going back to the rules we talked about, think they have to eat their vegetables plain. Right? Like, it's okay to put some oil and salt in there. It's okay to put some Parmesan cheese. It's okay to put a little bit of butter. But I hear so many people say, oh, well, I dip my carrots in ranch, so that probably just defeats the purpose of eating carrots. I say, no, it's getting you to eat the carrots, and the carrots still have all their nutritional value, even with a little bit of ranch, so go for it.
I'm a big carrots and hummus guy.
Oh, well, even better. Hummus would definitely be the better choice, but there's no shame in needing a little bit of ranch to eat your raw veggies. That's
it makes total sense. Yeah. Karen, thank you so much for this conversation. Anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who listened, and feel free to reach out to me if there's anything I can do to help you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient Conversations. UKHR Health and Wellness registered dietitian Karen McNees explained the difference between intuitive and mindful eating. Intuitive eating is a more holistic approach to food that takes into account your body's natural wisdom and signals. Mindful eating, on the other hand, is more focused on the eating experience itself. She also discussed the dangers of diet culture and how it can lead to people losing touch with their natural hunger and fullness cues. She encourages people to find a balance between eating healthy foods and enjoying the foods they love. Thank you for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient. This podcast is brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. We offer a wide range of online and in-person services to support the well-being of UK employees, retirees, and their spouses. You can find experts in mental health, personal resilience, nutrition, and physical activity. We're ready to meet you where you are and address your unique needs. To learn more about the work, life, and well-being services offered by UK Human Resources, visit hr.uky.edu/wellbeing. You can also connect with us on social media and YouTube by searching @UKY Wellness or by email at healthandwellness@uky.edu.